Hello, everyone. So very well met. It seems we've all made it through to another Prehistory Guys Q&A session where we attempt, Rupert and I, to answer questions that have been put by yourselves since the last time. In the hot seat tonight, myself, Michael Bott, of course, and my beautiful assistant over there in France.
Rupert Suskin over here. I tell you what, you need to try mine.
Tell me, are you looking forward to answering these amazing questions tonight, Mr. Soskin?
Always look forward to answering the questions. Keeps us on our toes.
Yeah. Well, anyway, before we kick off doing that, if you're here and you haven't been with us on one of these shows before, let me say you are very welcome. We're so glad to see you. Do please hit the like and subscribe buttons and help make sure the YouTube algorithm gets the right idea and gives us a leg up the ladder. We're really grateful for the following we do have. We just passed the 30,000 subscribers, would you believe? However, our next goal is 100,000 subscribers. Be really great if you can help us get there. I have to tell you, though, we also have a small but beautifully formed Patreon community, you know who you are, who keep us on the straight and narrow and also help us directly to keep the content coming by supporting us through a regular subscription. There's a link to our Patreon page down below, and I'll probably put another link up above Rupert after the show is finished. Actually, I was scrolling through our Patreon page today. What, which way? Oh, no, it's that way. Oh, no, I
don't know whether the camera's mirroring or what. I have no idea.
It's going to be over there, Rupert. Don't confuse me. Yeah. Anyway, I was scrolling through our Patreon page today, and I tell you, I was amazed by all the content that's accumulated there over the last 3 years. It's the only place where all our output is gathered together in one place. There's the films, there's the interviews, the podcasts, the live shows, behind the scenes stuff, and other stuff. And stuff that only our Patreon supporters get to see. So if you take a look and consider joining the community, you'd be most welcome. So, hello guys, everybody there. Any news? Any developments over this side we need to share before we get going? Rupert?
Any news? We've got a number of
spit it out.
I was just looking at my notes and thinking, we have actually got a number of good interviews lined up that it's going to take us well into the summer, I would think, which should be fun.
Well, all the interviews.
We're really thrilled, actually. We've got Tim Darvill coming back on.
Yeah.
Prof. Tim Darvill. I mean, he's just a true giant in the world of archaeology. And that's going to be a thrill. So we're interviewing him actually back end of April because he's a busy boy. So I suppose one that might come out in May, might it, or June?
I guess so. Yeah.
Thereabouts. But we've got a number lined up, and we've got some good ones coming. So we'll watch this space. I'm going to tell you.
Michael Darby. What did you say, Michael Darby? What did Michael Darby thought he just stumbled across an Abbott and Costello show. Thanks. Nice one. Sorry, I'm having trouble with my screen here. It won't move about. Okay.
But so which is which, eh?
Don't yes.
Answer that question.
No, don't. So yeah, great interviews coming out and coming along, and we'll continue to pump out what content we can.
Actually, I will tell you. I will tell you one of the others though. We're interviewing Sue Greeney. For those of you that don't know, Sue Greeney, archaeologist, she has just done a massive amount of work on Mount Pleasant, which is a huge henge structure in Dorchester, and that's going to be really exciting because it's amazing what has come out of that piece of research. So yeah, we'll be talking to her fairly soon. So yeah, watch this space.
Indeed. Sue Butler asks, what does the bell do? Have we got a bell somewhere? Have we got a bell? No, I don't know what that is about. But welcome to a few names that I haven't seen before. Ifan Llewellyn from Wales. Very welcome.
Wales, we like Wales.
Hello from Tennessee from OTDA.
Cool.
I'm just reading names I haven't seen before. Green Dragon Reprised. We probably have met before. Kevin, Riley, Herbert, I think I know that name. You're very welcome, as are you all. And Lizzie Dale's here. Hello from Cornwall.
YouTube bell. Hello, Lizzie. YouTube bell. What YouTube bell? You're seeing some. I don't know.
Oh, because we're not seeing YouTube, so I can't say at the moment. Yeah, I'm confused. I'm not looking at YouTube at all. I'm just looking at the comments that are coming up. Anyway, I tell you what, folks. Thank you so much for all your questions. People that have asked questions in the last month. This month, more than any other month I can remember, I've had to go away and do some, a bit of research. And the things that have come up through being asked your questions, and the little sparks that have gone off in my brain about connections made, and I didn't know that before, because contrary to what you may think, we don't hold every bit of information in our heads all the time. That sometimes there are moments when we do have to go off and do a bit of research, isn't there, Rupert?
We do. And I'm not going to tell a lie, an increasing amount of senior moments. I don't see that improving at all, really. But it's surprising the amount of things that crop up where we hadn't actually realised that we'd forgotten them.
Yeah, but I mean, what it means is there's a lot of ground going to be covered tonight, and quite a few interesting bits. So without further ado, I think we'd better get on with it, don't you?
I'll do that thing.
All right. And first up is a question from Jasper Molinar, asking if we saw the article about the research into the use of bronze items and similar weights in the early Bronze Age as a form of money. Do you suppose there might have been a similar use of items, stone artifacts, as money in earlier periods? Yeah, do you know what? We did see that article, Jasper, if you're there, and we did consider doing a little piece about it, because it's something we've long asked questions around, how people paid for things, how trade was done, how exchange was made. So it seemed right up our street, but we didn't actually get round to doing it. But it's an excellent question, because what brings up something for me. What about you, Rupert? You got an angle.
It brings up lots for me, because it's stuff that, we've over the years, we've had a lot of conversations about this, that it's what price anything. If you're pre-currency, then so for example, one example is that at Grimes Graves, when they were excavating at Grimes Graves, which is, for those of you that don't know, is the flint mines over in the east of Britain. Now, they found in there a greenstone axe that had come from Cornwall. And the thing is that if you want a different kind of tool, then, so you've got a polished greenstone axe that takes an awful lot of work to produce. But then if you're a good flint napper, and back in the day, everybody would have been able to nap themselves a knife. It would have been, like whittling wood. It's what you do. You need a new piece of flint, a new knife, then you'll just make yourself one. And, we know knappers. Jeff Watson, one of our admins, and James Dilly, who we'll be interviewing him too, that you get a good napper, a good flint napper, and they'll make you a beautiful axe in under an hour. So you could have a bag of, say, flint knives that, you can knock out a flint knife in 10 minutes if you're a good napper. So supposing you've got a bag of knives and you actually want a greenstone axe, well, how many, 100 flint knives for a better quality axe? Maybe something like that. What if you want to go and get a pig? What price a pig? So clearly currency, that whatever the exchange was, and getting further on into, when you start getting into the Bronze Age, then I would imagine broken tools or seriously damaged axes that it's like rag and bone man, that you gather up your scrap and exchange it. I think one of the most intriguing things, I had never thought about it before, but our friend Che Rudge, who some of you may know. Now, Che pointed out, why do you not find any copper tools from the Chalcolithic period? Well, the reason you don't find any copper tools is because why would you keep a copper tool when you can trade it in with somebody, give somebody to mix with tin, and you get a nice bronze one that'll be an awful lot more durable? So all the old copper tools would have been traded in and made into bronze tools. Exchange would have just been whatever anybody wanted. Whatever you can exchange is currency.
However, Michael Darby's just he's on the same track as I am with this. I'll come in a moment. And Jasper is here. Hello there. Welcome. And thanks for your question. Because what it brought up for me, and it wouldn't have done if I hadn't, in my other life as a voice artist and thing, I read articles for an outfit called Curio. And I read an article the other day comparing the Rai currency, money, on the island of Yap, which only ceased recently in micro-Indonesia, to the concept of Bitcoin. The point about the Rai on Indonesia, on the island of Yap particularly, and Rai could be anything from a small stone disc with a hole in it to a massive thing that doesn't go anywhere, just sits outside a village, or indeed there's one that fell off a boat and sank to the bottom of the sea. The possession of these articles of currency didn't matter. Physical possession didn't matter as long as it was accepted who owned them. So these bits, the currency, the coinage, it didn't matter if it was in your pocket or in your house or anywhere, as long as there was a ledger somewhere or a trust mechanism to say you owned that thing. And then it could be used as exchange for ransom, for cattle, in marriage, what have you. It's a weird concept to get your head round, but I'm wondering if a similar thing didn't go on with the jadeite axes from the Alps and things like that, because they were given a certain value by just what they were. And as long as you've got a mechanism of trust about who owns what, then they actually become very, very strong. When we're all about having things and making sure there's stuff in our bank account, and we've got coinage in our pocket, you have to just look to Bitcoin and the trust elements there are around that, about how the blockchain works and all that, and you begin to see how these other things could have worked. I'm not there yet. I think it's just something that needs looking at. That concept of remote coinage, as it were, could be. I just wonder, could it be applied to so many artifacts in the Neolithic and the Bronze Age? So, yeah.
It is interesting, isn't it? I mean, everything has an intrinsic value, and it has a subjective and personal value. So there might be something that just by virtue of how long it took you to make something, maybe it's worth that much to you. And if you want something from somebody else, then it's your personal evaluation about how much you're prepared to exchange, isn't it, really?
Yeah.
I would imagine.
But I'd never thought of that before, the actual possession, in the hand possession, may not be essential for its effectiveness. So that is our answer to that, Jasper, and thank you for that, and thank you for sending us off on that little journey. This is what I mean, tonight's like this. So, yeah, let's move on. Question from Pick Core. What are our thoughts on Göbekli Tepe in Turkey? Well, to be absolutely frank, I'm just going to say what comes to my mind straight away. To be honest, I've not investigated, I've not researched Göbekli Tepe particularly myself. There are so many people with so many thoughts already about Göbekli Tepe that personally I've kind of stayed out of that fray, and also because it's a bit before the time, our favoured sort of timeline of prehistory. God, there's so much been written about Göbekli Tepe though, and the only thought I do have about Göbekli Tepe is that the dangers of trying to make any links from Göbekli Tepe forward in prehistory to anything that goes on in Europe. I think the time gap is so huge, and with no evidence of a connection, cultural linear connection between what was going on in Turkey, in Anatolia at that time, and forward into Europe, that it's very, very... it's a dangerous area to create links there. Yeah.
Yes, it is, but I think there are also some perspectives that need to be considered, and some of them seem to conflict. But for example, so you look at the age of Göbekli Tepe. Now, the age, give or take, of the lavish stone monument that you see it's about 9,000 years old. Now, the roots of Göbekli Tepe, they've dated back to about 12,000 years ago. So clearly you had people living in that place for an immense amount of time. Yeah. Now, the problem is, whatever happened, this was almost a kind of standalone society. There's nothing like it anywhere else. So you can start making best guesses about what happened, and it could have been a very small, sophisticated society that was wiped out for whatever reason. But you also need to bear in mind that 10,000 years ago, you've got places like Jericho, the Tells in in Israel and the Middle East. You've got sophisticated cities, for want of a better word, that are pretty much concurrent. What makes Göbekli Tepe different is that it's megalithic. Now, if you actually look at raw materials and what's available, then at Göbekli Tepe, rock is pretty much an available resource. But you go to a lot of other places and structures had to be made from, whether it was adobe, mud brick, or, that stone was not necessarily so readily available. So you have to consider that in terms of why is Göbekli Tepe so different. In terms of interpreting it, then I the thing is, you look at the artistry there, which is so sophisticated. You look at the carvings of those animals and the bas-reliefs of birds and all sorts, and then some people, experts, have said that the huge monoliths there are not monoliths. They're not monoliths. They've got a stone on top of a stone, but megalithic. These huge things that they say they represent people, and I say, no, they don't. No, they don't. If they were capable of carving animals as sophisticated as that, then they were quite capable of carving human beings a lot better than an upright with a slab on the top. I don't think they represented people at all. It's like every other site. We're missing the horizontals. You know, I think, well, for sure, that was a roofed structure. Whatever the roof was made of, don't know. But
there's a kind of two people have mentioned. I was going to say there's a sentiment in the chat about the whether Göbekli Tepe was made, constructed, and used by hunter-gatherers or by farmers, and the kind of the riddle of that you need to be reasonably settled to create a place like Göbekli Tepe.
Oh, you're throwing that at me?
I'm throwing it open anyway. I thought you'd have a I thought you'd have a thought on that. Like you say, I haven't thought very deeply about it, but I do know. Yeah,
it's that in itself is a very interesting point, because again, it's a real risk when you start looking at the past through modern eyes, and we have such a polarized view. To, you know, you were either hunter gatherers or you were farmers, and I think that's a real smokescreen of a categorization that you could have had people, moderately nomadic people, who populated a huge region, but there was nevertheless a coming together place. I don't have a problem with that concept at all. And so it could have been people who travelled the whole year but came together in a place.
But I think the clue is not so much at Göbekli Tepe, but more in places like Çatalhöyük.
I agree.
Yeah,
I agree. Çatalhöyük, which is pretty much the same age for the peak period, and Çatalhöyük is this huge city. I mean, how many people lived at Çatalhöyük? Well, thousands.
Which doesn't make sense if our concept of hunter-gatherers, has got anything to do with it. I don't think it has. And yet, we are told they were not agrarian. And that's the question. I don't know. Is that true? I don't know. And that's where my ability to have anything to say about it kind of runs out, because I haven't done a deep dive look on all that. We'll do. Maybe we'll report back and educate ourselves.
I think so much of that is unknowable, though. Well, I'm saying that I mean, as technology romps forward, and we have more sophisticated ways of analysing remains, but you've got to bear in mind that what was it we reported a couple of years back, that they'd discovered now admittedly that was more into the Middle East. It was Natufian. But it was the oldest known toast they had found. It was like 13 or 14,000 years old. Now the thing is, it's the oldest known toast, not bread, toast. They'd got round to cooking bread. They knew that. Oh God, that tastes good. Why didn't we do this before? So, so clearly, people have been getting their act together from that point of view for a long time now. Even if if we're saying that this is pre-farming. But farming, that's our own mindset, that if you live somewhere where, because back then that whole part of the world was an awful lot more, verdant, let's say, I mean, just, like you look at the Middle East, green and lush back then. So if you've got natural wild swathes of wild grasses, then people could go wading through that, gathering seeds or grain to grind down. You don't need to be farming it. If you've got acres and acres and oceans of the stuff already. Why farm it? You just go wading through it and take the grain. So, I think our notion of this is pre-farming is actually barking up the wrong tree.
We'll just see. Like I say, a close look at the actual archaeological evidence is merited here, I think. And Merin's here, by the way, who has recently said, how about hunter-gatherers who processed the wild grain? Yeah. That's, right, I'm just scrolling down quickly to see.
You see, Cork thinks that Vegemite is superior to Marmite. You see, we might have a cultural gulf there. You see, I go Marmite every time.
Marmite tastes like somebody already ate it. That's so good. Great. Thank you so much. Anyway, I mentioned
talking about quotes if you're not careful, Cork.
Merin is here if you want to, because Merin posed a question which we didn't actually we haven't scheduled to answer there. But
Merin's question was almost rhetorical, wasn't it?
Well, we're just taking the point to acknowledge the question and thank you for the little heads up about something to go and investigate. That's all.
Yes,
need to say
we will do that. We will investigate and we will.
We have more to say about Göbekli Tepe than I thought we might, even though we don't know much. So I move on in that case.
Go on then.
All right. Robin Fowler. I don't know if you're here in the chat
Robin,
yet.
You had to do it, didn't you?
What is the best explanation for the geometrically carved stone balls found only in Scotland? And also, it's not just only in Scotland, it's concentrated in the north and northeast, isn't it?
Well, Aberdeenshire is the is the focus.
Oh,
isn't it?
yes,
but,
yes. East.
Yes. Do you want to go?
No, because I'm setting up visuals. You go.
Okay, I'll go. Well, nobody knows. There's 1,000,001 theories. Well, maybe not that many. There's quite a few theories. Personally, I favour the idea that they're actually more like a Victorian embroidery sampler. I think it's what apprentice sculptors, masons were given to do. That that would really test your skills, and that's also why you find them from so crude, where they're pretty
very
blobby, amorphic
lumpen,
things.
things through to what you can see on the screen now. Yeah, which I think is probably the most elaborate one.
Yeah, the Towie is just insane. This is now somebody else that we're hoping to interview. Hugo Anderson Weimark is the man who does these extraordinary 3D modelling.
Yes, I'm turning this over on my screen live now.
Yes, you can go to this website and you can zoom in. Do a zoom in. Yes, do a zoom in, Mike. Show them how.
Oh yes, I was going to.
So
show that bit actually, because yeah. And
now, what you have to bear in mind when you look at this artistry, if you haven't seen these before, is that these are Neolithic. They didn't have metal tools. How'd you do that then?
Yeah, with such accuracy. And how do you conceive?
These are not big. It's about the size of a tennis ball.
Yeah, I'm going to show you something in a moment. Anyway, there we are.
It's just.
How about that? Shall I bring us back to normality a moment?
Whatever you want to call normality. That's not normal. I mean, there are theories. I mean, for example, some people have suggested, and it was something I considered for a while, I must be honest, that you could wrap a leather thong around, because they're not perfectly spherical. There's always, there's grooves that you could wrap thongs into or sinew. So you could make weapons out of them. You could make fishing weights out of them. But why on earth would you make them that elaborate? I'm saying
I mean,
that
however, you say elaborate, but
yes.
just at the other end of the scale. Eh?
You're a blobby. Have you got a blobby?
I've got a blobby, yeah.
That's a blobby.
Yeah, maybe a bit of wear and tear involved there, but, you know.
Yeah.
And what's that scar across that front
to
there?
Me, see, I think that really illustrates how they could be apprentice pieces. You know, that you're really showing your masonry skills, your sculpting skills, bearing in mind that this is pre-metal tools. Even that, it's a pretty... Sibylla isn't with us tonight, is she? I haven't seen her.
Haven't seen her.
Because Sibylla, one of our regulars, I know a lot of you know her. Sibylla is a sculptor, and you know, it's always good to get her feedback on things like this. Because I don't know how you would do something that elaborate.
Ty says in Africa they have similar things that uses slingshots, and they fit in the palm.
Interesting.
A weapon. You see, but I don't think, you know, because weapons are not more effective because you've decorated them, and to spend so much time on something that may be disposed of. So, you know, when a single something, you know, an ordinary rock will do the same job as efficiently. I find that a difficult one. However,
it's intriguing, isn't it? See, I'd like to know. I mean, Ty, you said they have similar things that they use as slingshots. See, as a slingshot, you'd think, you're not going to get that back. If it was actually tied onto something, I can say, well, maybe it's like a mason chain. You know, that
when so much time, you think
you're not letting them go. So yes, it's a huge amount of time to invest in something that you're then going to break on someone's head. I don't know.
Yes. So how many of you know what this is? We've got to go there.
Yeah. I'll tell you what, it's a lumpy game though. Not that one, but Towie.
Well, yes, but you know, these are not actually dependent. It's not important that they're perfect. These lines on them have no effect whatsoever. They're for personal identification. And if playing a game like that was a thing, then you'd like in bowls or darts or so, you have your own personal things, so everybody knows whose ball. And we're not playing on hard surfaces here, so the rolling.
Are you suggesting that you could even have a situation where the winner actually took the Towie ball off the loser?
Yeah, that would be a terrible thing. I don't know. My other thought was, because we had a chat with James Dilley this afternoon as a prelim to recording an interview with him, and I came away from that thinking, because he knows about carving bits in rock, and I came away with the idea there could be samplers for individual artisans and stone carvers, just as a sample of what they can do, or what you were saying earlier, Rupert, as practice things, because you learn by creating a ball in your hand like that and decorating it as finely as you can. You'd learn so much about the use of tools. Yeah. So
it wouldn't be quick, would it? David says, what's the context where they've been found singly in groups, ? Yeah, I mean, they are predominantly individual. I don't have any.
I think so.
I think there was one, wasn't there one location? Oh God, I don't remember. I think there was one location where more than one was found together, but it certainly wasn't many.
But they tend to be individual is the answer to that. I don't know about group things. The only thing that is against this game theory thing is that you don't find very many broken ones. it seems, or even damaged. You'd expect, if it was a game and it was played similarly to boule or pétanque, then you'd expect some damage in the stone. I think we've exhausted that, though. But
pretty much. I mean, I think it is worth saying, that even though they've found that, it is that regionalised, but there are 425 known stone balls, which is quite a few.
Yeah, well,
when you think that's what we've dug up. So, how many are there that haven't been found? I mean, clearly they are very specific to that region.
Yeah.
It is. It's very curious, and
I don't know. What are we going to do with Alex? He's late.
Back of the class, mate. Back of the class.
You're very welcome. No, it's great to see you. Thanks for coming. Thanks for tuning in. Goodness gracious. It's good. Wildflowers here because, believe it or not, next question is from Wildflower. Is that how we should address you? Anyway, do you have or can you get any new information about the wheel found in the house of the Must Farm? Did you find out anything further?
I didn't find anything new. No, I must admit the whole Must Farm thing.
Yeah.
Because it's
actually yes. So I'll just interrupt you a moment there.
Yeah,
I'm just scrolling back because Wildflower's question was actually a lot fuller than what I've put there. I just cut it down to fit it on the screen. The question was: do you have or can you get any newer information about the wheel found in the house of the Must Farm? In the documentary about it, it told, despite being in a house on the water, it should be from a cart. Did they find a second one or more? A spontaneous thought: could it be the flywheel from a potter's wheel? There were so many craft tools all around. I know it is out of your time frame. No, it's not out of our time frame, really. But
it's not out of
you're
our time
curious,
frame,
and we're curious. Yes.
Yes, I'd actually. I'd like to know why you.
Stephanie, we'll call you Wildflower. Is Stephanie? Hi, Steph.
Hello, Stephanie.
Oh, sorry.
I'd like to know
familiar.
why you thought
Stephanie.
it was outside our time frame, because that means either you didn't know how old Must Farm was, or you're not sure about what we normally do. So if you want to say that in a comment, then we can clarify that straight away.
Yeah,
it's an interesting one, isn't it? I see.
But to be clear, Must Farm is 3,000 years old. In the Bronze Age, so it's well in our remit. Yeah, and we should do more about Must Farm.
It's an interesting one because when you look at the sophistication of Must Farm, I mean, the fact that there was still fabric on the loom. For God's sake, they found just everything there. It's it's not without reason that they've called it the British Pompeii, because it really is that important. The thing is, you're absolutely right. It could be a potter's wheel or something equivalent. It could be.
My humble view on that, it's far too big for a potter's wheel. It's a metre across.
It's a metre across, yeah? What's your point?
Well, to work on a potter's wheel, you need to be reasonably close to the pot you're working on, and that wheel would prohibit you from having it in arm's reach at the centre.
Possibly. It depends what you're throwing.
Potter's wheels are, usually no bigger than that.
I've worked on bigger ones than that myself.
Okay.
Admittedly, at art college in the 70s, but
yeah, fair enough. And the mechanized ones as well tended to be a bit big, but it's not a comfortable thing to work on. I wouldn't have thought at that size, and it does have its hub, its original oak hub on the Must Farm one. See, it is a fascinating thing, though. Yeah.
It is. I mean, it makes sense completely that it's off a cart or whatever of some description.
But here's the thing about that wheel: it must have been close to or in the house because it was charred from the fire. And Kevin said he hadn't heard of Must Farm. What can we say? Do a search. There's quite a lot out there, and there's a documentary or two about it. BBC was all over it. It's this abandoned community of houses on stilts over the fens there, and close to the river that collapsed in a fire.
It is well worth looking into because it's astonishing what they found there. Absolutely astonishing.
Dignan 19. We are talking about 2000 BC, aren't we? Oh no, sorry, 1000 BC. 3,000.
Yeah, it's 3,000 years old, give or take.
Yeah. Okay. Yes, the wheel did have signs of charring on it, so it was either in the house as it burnt or it was adjacent to the house. And there's only one of them, and it's in the. I'll show you actually. Haha. Just talk amongst yourselves. Let me find.
You've got the picture of the wheel. Jolly good. Well done.
Yeah, I will have in a second. Anyway.
It's.
Let's see if that comes up properly. No, told you that, wouldn't it? There we go.
But the other thing is, I don't want to get contentious here, but the fact that it's that they only found one and it's a meter across, that it could have been for grinding grain. Could have been.
That is true. Yeah, there we go. There it is, in situ.
Yeah.
Actually being excavated, this wheel. Yeah.
Yeah.
In three parts, joined together with dovetail joints.
Mm-hmm.
Beyond that, I don't know much about it, nor have been able to find out much more about it.
I was just going to say, I wonder what Merrin thinks about that, and Merrin has come back with how. Because if you just look at the way a windmill works, you only need somebody turning that axle to, and then people pummeling in it as it gets turned round. I don't see why not. Admittedly, I'm willfully grasping at straws here. It's like, what could it be for? As there's only one of them. Yeah. And it could be that if it was off a cart and there were two of them, that one of them was just completely destroyed.
I think the kicker is that the contemporary with this in Germany, they've got quite a lot identical off carts.
Okay, well that kind of answers that question then.
Yeah, that is amongst other things. And they did find a horse not far away that they thought originally was a cow in this excavation, but it turned out it was an actual horse, which is quite early for a domesticated horse still in this country. Yes. So I think it's opening kind of windows into the things we didn't know, vis-a-vis wheels and horses perhaps in this country. And, surprise, surprise, we'll have to wait until the next discovery to firm things up a bit. But it's good to ask the questions, and I'm not knocking them out of I'm only reporting what I've found myself. But it is its similarity to other items on the continent that have brought people down on the side, of being assertive that it is asserting that it is from a cart. I don't think there's anything, not something we can talk further about, but it's one of those things, it's illuminated, one of those questions that's illuminated things for me.
Well, it's one of those things.
Thank you, Stephanie.
The question was, do we know anything new about it? No.
We don't know.
That's pretty much all that's known at the moment, really. It's a wheel.
I don't know if there's been any papers come out, but there's one good thing out there. I think it's the Dig Diary from Must Farm. That's a goodie to get
yes, it is.
Clear information about how things came out of the ground there.
Oh, heavens above. Help me out here. Is it Peter Knight?
Yes, it is. No, Mark Knight. Is it Mark Knight?
No.
It's not somebody Knight.
Help us out, Marion. I'm sure Marion knows.
Yeah,
the lead archaeologist at Must Farm, anyway. I'm sure he's published a bunch of papers, hasn't he? I think he took Archaeologist of the Year back in 2017 or something for his work on Must Farm.
Yeah. I haven't seen a paper from Must Farm there.
There you go.
Mark Knight, yeah. I haven't seen a paper out of there. Maybe I haven't been looking hard enough, but it'd be fascinating to see. It'll be a big one, like the reports coming out of Ness of Brodgar. It's been such a big site, so much to report. That'll be a big read when it comes. I expect they're saving up for that one. Shall we move on?
Yeah, go on then.
To a question from Matt Entwistle, or Matt E, depending on... Yes. Do we have any thoughts about King Arthur's Hall on Bodmin Moor? Apart from being rectangular, it sits in a depression that is quite boggy. Is it an enclosure or a Neolithic swimming pool? And what about Stripple Stones, which happens to be not too far away? Slipped that one in, didn't you, Matt?
Who did slip that one in? But it's it's really strange. Somebody else has asked about the Stripple Stones tonight.
No, that was Matt twice. I slipped it in.
Okay, was it? Well, okay. In that case, I want to address a point about the Stripple Stones then that was in the question. All right, let's do King Arthur's Hall first.
Okay. Do you want me to double check on that? And I'll get to Matt's question.
Yeah, because there was one of the comments or an aspect of the question.
Oh, right. Shall I? Yeah, it is. I completely truncated Matt's later question and put it on the end of this one just so that they were together. That's
okay. All. Well, in that case, let's do King Arthur's Hall first and then come back to the Stripple Stones. Yeah. Well, go on then. What are your thoughts on King Arthur's Hall?
Well, I hadn't had many thoughts on King Arthur's Hall, though I did know of it from before. It's not something I'd done a deep dive on at all. I've got an image here that might help. It's not a very good one, but I'll see. Yeah, there we go. It's a sort of panoramic view. We've got a rectangular, a very almost perfectly rectangular space. 47 yards by 20 yards, stones lining the bank on the outside, not as revetments, but leaning up against it, and a bank that's been created by digging out the inside. And the strange thing is, we do have a boggy interior here. Whether it was boggy then, we don't really know. Let's come back. Yeah, what this brought up for me is I had a look at Aubrey Burl, and I didn't expect it to be mentioned in there because it's not a circle, obviously. But he brings together the fact that although rectangular megalithic structures, megalithic monuments, call them what you will, are wholly uncommon in England, Britain, in the UK, there are quite a few just over the Channel in Brittany. So it is perhaps indicative of a strong Breton Cornwall connection that maybe even extends over to Ireland, and maybe even speaks to gold tin trade across that side, of the Atlantic seaboard, up from Brittany up to Cornwall and beyond up to Ireland at the time, because apparently there are a couple that look similar or have similar construction bases in Ireland. So that was a wonderful thing that came up from me and sort of launches the whole of Cornwall thing and what was going on in the earlier times, because I think some people had thought that King Arthur's Hall was late or more recent. But if you're going to make the Breton connection, then that shoves it right back in time. As for its actual purpose, sorry, but the connection is made. That's the important thing.
Kevin's just saying King Arthur never existed. Not the point. It's just the name they gave it. Honestly, ignore the name. Ignore the name.
It's not a hall either. I don't think.
No, exactly. Exactly. You can't help the name they gave something 500 years ago. As we can't do anything about that. That's what it's called. The thing that I find interesting about King Arthur's Hall is I have no evidence to support this at all. I just think that rectangular structures tended to be timber. And I think that there might have been a reason to ditch and bank it, maybe because of the boggy terrain, although I'm not sure that it would have been boggy that long ago. Don't know. But I think that there's always that thing of we don't have any others left. That doesn't mean that there weren't any others.
Quite.
And if there was a practical reason to use a rectangular shape, then it could well be that all the others that there were maybe even used for longer and longer periods until it got into Iron Age and more conventional farming, and they just disappeared because land was progressively worked to a greater and greater extent. We don't know. We don't know.
Yeah. Sorry, the chat has kicked off a bit about the existence of Arthur or not. Don't go there, guys.
No, stop it. Stop it. Seriously. Because even if whether he did or whether he didn't, he's well outside our remit. All right? Argue on your own time. Oh, dear. Yeah. I hope he did.
Yeah.
Yes. Sheep-dick tank. Do you know what? Matt, there's... I probably shouldn't go there. There's a very interesting aspect. This is nothing to do with King Arthur's Hall. There's a very interesting aspect to causewayed enclosures and palisaded enclosures, and something.
You'll be sad you mentioned
is,
sheep dip.
I'm going to be. Yeah. So are you. That at the entrance to some enclosures, there is a clay-lined pit. And true to form, the archaeological thinking tends to be that it's a ritual pit where you had to pass through this water-filled pit where you were cleansed before you went into the ritual inner sanctum of the enclosure, to which I slap my forehead and say, no, it's a sheep dip. I think that's where they, when they were getting the animals back inside in the enclosure, and they wanted to scrub the crap off them first. That's what I think they are. Anyway, having said
the important thing is, thank you so much, Matt, for bringing Arthur's Hall up and putting it back on the map, as it were. Because it is anomalous amongst everything else. But
I'm wondering if Lizzie knows anything about King Arthur's Hall. Are you there, Lizzie?
Oh, yeah. Tell us. Well, I know Lizzie knows something about Stripple Stones.
Our reporter from the southwest.
Indeed.
Yeah.
I think that's all we can say for the moment about.
I can't add anything else to King Arthur's Hall. I did want to pick up on the rest of the question about the Stripple Stones.
Yes, indeed, and I'll go back to. So I've just truncated it to what about the Stripple Stones, which is probably a bit rude of me. Matt did say, just to add another Bodmin question into the mix, I recently learnt that the Stripple Stones are part of the only circular henge, make a note of that, in the southwest, and that it was first mentioned during the reign of Queen Elizabeth. Given that it is the only one in the southwest and that there have been previous conversations that henges were meeting places, could this be an indication that Cornwall was far sparsely populated than Wiltshire, for example, that has many more henges?
And the reason I wanted to pick up on that was because you've said that it's the only circular henge in the southwest. And I think what's happened here is that you have misread circle henge, and you've interpreted that to be circular henge, because a circle henge is a specific thing. It's a henge with a stone circle upon it, like the Devil's Quoits in Oxfordshire or Arbor Low in Derbyshire. So you've got a henge monument with a stone circle on the central plateau, because it's not at all the only henge in the southwest. So I think what you've read is that it's the only circle henge in the southwest, which I think that's probably true, but it's by no means the only henge. I mean, there's not too far away. There's Casterly henge and
Stop it, Cork.
Do you know what? We're loving you already, Cork. But you want to be careful, because we'll start talking about Devil's Waterfalls, and then and then all hell will break loose. Henges in the southwest. There's quite a few. And if you look at just the whole range of megalithic sites in the southwest, clearly it was a very busy part of the world.
Yeah, I've got an overhead plan view of Stripple Stones. Where is it? Here we go.
I know it's been restored, but it's a bit of a... Oh, okay, you mean that. I thought you were going to show a photograph.
Yeah,
you can't tell much from a photograph, can you?
Oh, no. But, I mean, a pretty darn good henge there. I wonder how deep the ditch was. I wonder how high the bank was. Interesting kind of indentations here at the
they
east, west,
restored
and
it.
Northeast.
They restored it comparatively recently, didn't they? It was only like 2017 or something.
Let's ask Elizabeth. Yeah.
Yes, in fact, I know Lizzie knows. She was here earlier on. Maybe she had to disappear. But if you look at those straight lines on the right-hand side of that image that take a right angle, going off that, that's actually a much more modern. That was a hedgerow, I believe.
That's a hedge
boundary and hedgerow that cut across that. That's been removed.
Oh, has it? Okay.
When it was restored, that's now not there. Yeah. But yeah, I mean that's quite a henge.
Quite substantial. Oh, and also those stones. Interesting. The interesting thing about this is the stones are quite tall. I'm looking at 3 meters here.
Oh, are they really? I didn't know that.
But the interesting thing is their stone sockets are not very deep, less than a meter deep. So unsurprisingly, most of these stones, fallen over. Yeah. So obviously they wanted the stones to stand tall and more interested in looking good rather than staying upright.
Yeah.
Maybe at the time.
Firstly, hello, Chubby Moth.
Hello.
Bubba Younger says, don't forget Coupland enclosure. Don't start me off on Coupland enclosure. Coupland enclosure is the...
You've started him off on Coupland enclosure. You can see what you've done there.
It's the oldest stone. It's the oldest stone in Britain. That's crazy old. But let's not do that. It's an interesting thing. Somebody must have the stat in their head. I really do not. How many circle henges are there remaining that we know about? Because I can't think of that many, really.
Yeah. But no, I mean, it's no apology necessary, Matt, because we're all learning together as we go along. That's the wonderful thing about this, We don't have it in our heads. And thank you so much for, as I said before, chucking these monuments back into the ring, because they bring, henge monuments, the facts of henge monuments and connections between Arthur's Hall and the continent. They bring Bodmin Moor and that area of Cornwall right back into play, don't they? in terms of
They do.
exciting
They
things
do.
going on instead of being out
They
there
do.
on the peninsula. And maybe there were Bronze Age and stuff.
Ty said amateurs. I think she's talking about us.
Yeah. If the hat fits. Yeah.
Kevin says, are the stones on the top of the henge or within it? Excuse me. What do you mean by that, Kev? Basically, the stone circle is on the central plateau.
Yeah. There you can see the dark patches just inside the ditch area.
Yeah.
Not much of a berm there. Or maybe there is.
It's really not, is it? It's really not.
Yeah. Anyway, I hope that helps.
Baba Yaga, you're really being a troublemaker. Nabdoplier is really interesting. The thing about Nabdoplier is that it's actually quite small. Surprisingly small. But yeah, Nabdoplier actually looks more like Callanish in terms of its arrangement. It's the closest thing to Callanish that I know.
Have we done there?
Yeah,
as far as we can, Rupert? You're giggling.
I'm just looking at comments. Well done, Cork. Cork's looked up. There are 13 apparently circle henges.
Oh, brilliant!
Including
Bosco and
Merry Maidens. Merry Maidens. Merry Maidens wasn't a henge. Cork, did you look up stone circles or circle henges? Anyway,
we shall investigate further.
Yes, we will.
Shall we move on to Diorman's question? And thanks. Ty's question. And thanks for that, Matt. As I said,
Thanks, Cork. I'll check that out.
Yeah. Excellent. Ty, how are you, Ty? I can see you there. Yes, you are. Ty, having seen school children pulling the Bluestones the other day, and Ty's referring to the BBC programme called Stonehenge, The Lost Circle Revealed. We had words to say about that. We did a few days ago. The other day, I wondered how thick are the slabs in the entrance passage of Maze How? How many tons each, and could they have been moved by a sledge? Yeah, it was interesting that they got well. I mean, it's all wonderful, it's all good television, etc., and they probably learned a heck of a lot getting together to move those stones, or the Bluestones equivalent, for a few hundred yards there, showing that it can be done. Obviously, that was the point. The worst documentary title ever. Could be. Anyway, your immediate reaction, Rupert?
My immediate reaction. Okay, well, I'm not actually sure how thick the slabs are, but they're not very thick.
Maze How?
Yes, at Maze How. Yeah, all the rock on Orkney does. Do you know what? I'm forgetting my geology. Is it shearing or cleaving? But it basically comes away in nice, manageable, relatively thin slabs. Yeah. And each of those, for those of you that don't know, the Maze How passage tomb, the passage grave, the passage, the walls of the either side,
entrance passage,
are single pieces of stone, which are about 30 feet long. I mean, it's ridiculously long single piece of stone, but they're thin enough that actually they only weigh about 3 tons each. You know, you look at them and think that they'd be ridiculously heavy, but he said as if 3 tons was something you could stick in a shopping bag.
Orcadian flagstone,
you know, by a team of experienced people, it makes them, you know, that's manageable. That is definitely manageable. Martin said Orcadian flagstone. Thank you, Martin. So were they moved by sledge? Well, one of the wonderful experiments that came out of experimental archaeology some years ago was the use of seaweed for moving rocks around.
Well, actually, wasn't that something that was invented while they were making the Britain's Neolithic
ancient capital or something?
No, Britain's Neolithic capital. About
that's the one. Yeah,
yeah. Neil Oliver
got the title wrong. Yeah,
the 3-part. I think that's something they came up with during the making of that program. I may be wrong, but thinking back, that's how it occurred at the time. That somebody had the bright idea. Why don't we try?
You may well be right, but it's equally, I think, distinctly possible. I mean, it's such a, there's such a vast resource of it, and it did work so very well. And you think, why the hell not? Because I can't help thinking, you could put a 30-foot. Go on.
But I can't help thinking, why the heck not? If you've got so many cattle, put them to use.
Yeah. The only thing that is a real question in my mind about those two stones in particular is if you're just going to get cattle to drag those across that landscape, okay, they might not have had to take them far, but 30-foot long and that thin, I know that one of them's cracked. So it obviously broke when they were, well, at some point in its movement from where it was found to being put in the tomb, it broke. But the one on the left-hand side of the passage going in is one single piece. Now, I can't help thinking that if you just dragged that across the ground, that would break, wouldn't it? Don't know.
Yeah, maybe to get an impression of how slender those stones probably are. Just look at the stones of Stennis. I would have thought.
Yeah, that's what they are.
That they are. If you stand looking, edge on to one of the stones of Stennis, they're slender, so slender it's ridiculous. It's like telegraph poles. Compared to their slab-like appearance from the side. It's an interesting one. It seems kind of a what is it?
I'm sorry. No, you just carry on a second, because it's my cat who's hammering on the window. You can't hear it, but he's hammering on the window, and he's not going to shut up until I let him in.
You go sort your cat out. Drama in the ode. No, Maze How. It's one of those questions, Ty. Thank you so much about it. I'll spare you what's going on over there. One of those questions that had me look a bit further about Maze How. And fascinating thing about the dating, just as a sidebar down there, I didn't realise that the only reason it's dated to 3000 BC, well, actually later than that, 2800 BC, oh, he's back, is that it's a kind of typology thing. There's nothing actually at Maze How that's been specifically dated, but because it's related to other tombs on Orkney, it's been the dates for the other tombs in which there are recovered burials and carbon dating and the rest of it. Interestingly, it's been put later in time because it's seen as a refinement of earlier tombs. And I was thinking, well, maybe that's the wrong way around, because my take on it is the links that have been made by many of Maze How to Newgrange and even Brinkerthly that maybe Maze How arrived there, as a supreme example of that kind of tomb, and anything else after that may be a copy or not a degradation, but a lesser monument than maybe Maze How was the first one, and everything else came after, but not quite so well built. Who knows? We've got this funny thing in our heads that advancement means things get better and better. It's not necessarily so. When you've got an insular an insular community, something special arrives, and anything else maybe after that is not necessarily a development, but could be. There's a word I'm not sourcing there, but you know what I mean.
Yeah, it might be development, but it's not progress.
Yeah. But I come down on this
points. Go on.
No, carry on.
Look, you see, he's had enough now.
Your cat.
He made his point. He's going. If you're going to ignore me, I'm going.
Yeah. It's historically settled that cats do not work. Period.
Yeah, I know. But you see,
Diane says that. I didn't say that. I was just saying.
Yeah, that's all right. Let's not go into the cat and dog thing. We won't do that.
Yeah.
Ty made a couple of comments where she said that seaweed is hard to come by in Egypt. Yeah, but the thing is that that you can you use whatever resources you have, don't you?
Yeah.
And there is one bas relief in Egypt that shows. They were actually they're moving one of the massive statues. Was it Ramesses? Can't remember. And there is an illustration of however many, like 100 and something men, with a bloke on the front of the sledge pouring water onto the sand. And they actually we're back to experimental archaeology again. They actually did some experiments with this, where if you put the right amount of liquid, get the amount wrong, and it just makes everything go terrible. But if you get the amount of liquid right, pouring it on sand, then the stones just slide beautifully across the surface. Now, by contrast, you've said in the Andes, well, if you're looking at the Inca structures, I mean, Sacsayhuaman is a very good example. That there are actually accounts from the Spanish missionaries. There's one in particular, and I'm terrible, another senior moment, I can't remember his name. But there is one account of, he wrote about it was something like, I don't know, 5,000 men or something crazy. Where they were pulling this enormous stone up the mountainside, and he was writing about. He watched them do it, and they slipped when it was a good way up, and the stone just plummeted back down the mountain, wiping out half the workforce on its way down. So it's just that you have whatever resources at your disposal. So I don't have a problem with the idea of them using seaweed on Orkney. It's there's loads of it there. It's
depending, it's contingency. Did somebody think that's a good idea at the time, or is it just reserved for the time that film crews were on Orkney filming for Britain's Neolithic capital? Who knows? Yeah. And cattle was a huge resource there. I cannot imagine, that so many of this stuff has not been used, that they weren't using cattle as tractors.
It's probably a good thing that you brought that up, because we have talked about this before. That it was some research that came out of it was Hungary, wasn't it? It was Hungary or Romania. 2 years
yes,
ago.
very good. Yeah, well remembered.
Where they had actually proven that this is well before farming in Europe, that you could tell from the bones of the cattle that they had excavated that there were growths on the knuckle bones that you only get when greater than your own body weight is pushed onto joints. Basically, they proved that the cattle had been used for traction, and this was pre-farming, so it wasn't for ploughing. So what could they have been using them for traction? Well, it must have been for dragging massive timbers around, or maybe megaliths. They can't prove that because they've only got the cattle's bones, not what they were actually doing with it. But it is before the plough. So so the fact that they could have been using cattle to drag these stones around on Orkney seems completely sensible. But it's what would they have been dragging? Would they have put them on sledges or seaweed? But yeah.
You get a couple of aurochs. You don't need any seaweed. Oh.
Candide says Unumama expose. Yeah, that's gone now, hasn't it? Hasn't that left the solar system? I think.
Yeah. I'm just Cork just has asked us a question about the recumbent stone circles of Aberdeenshire. Do you mind, Cork, if we get round to answering that we leave that to the end and see if we've got any time left, because we do reserve the questions we answered to the ones that have been asked on the YouTube community page when we post a placeholder for people to go there and ask these questions. That's how they get answered. But we'd love to answer that because we love the recumbent stone circles. So don't think we're sort of leaving you out. Okay. Right. Did we answer that question properly, Ty? I don't know. It's the thing it brought up for me was it's interesting that we always revert to, when thinking about how things got towed around, always envisage, and it's probably to do with the meme of teams of slaves dragging stones up the side of pyramids, that we turn to the idea of manpower rather than as a default, rather than thinking, well, they were managing cattle. Why wouldn't they? You see what I mean? It's interesting. Yeah, and using school children, I think that's just. I know, I'm joking, but they proved a point with the school children pulling the blue stones, that it is humanly possible. Why? If you've got cattle, I don't know, but I'm sure the answers will come sometime. Shall we move on?
Go on then.
A question from Diorman. I know you're there, Diorman, and thank you for the question. What can you tell us about the Pomelta Circle in Germany? Another question that sort of blows my socks off. I don't know about you, Rupert. There's so much to talk about here, and yet we don't know that much about Pomelta. Talk about Pomelta. What where it is, and what it is, and why it gets us excited, Rupert.
Pomelta is a henge in Germany. Well, actually, Diorman said it's in Germany. Good point. It's a henge. It's so ditch and bank, in this instance, timber. As is very common on the continent. It's worth pointing out that if you look up henges, then you will usually read that henges are unique to Britain. And it's one of those things that, yes, if you look for the word henge, it's because that's what they call them in Britain. There are all sorts of different names. In Ireland, they're called raths. Often in Eastern Europe, they're called rondels and roundels. They can be causewayed enclosures, they can be palisaded enclosures. Basically a hengiform. It's more accurate to call them hengiform structures. And in Europe, there are loads of them.
There is about between 120 and 150. Yeah. Top figure is 150 of known Hinges.
That's the point of
But they're not called Hinges. What are they called?
Rondels. Oh no, it's the ridiculous German name. I don't know.
Yes. Well, it's only not ridiculous if you're German.
I beg your pardon. Correct. It's a name I don't remember.
Oh, well, you carry on.
Hello, Sibylla. We've been talking about you. Yes. Anyway, Pomelta. So it's 4,200 years old.
Kreisgrabenanlagen. Kreisgrabenanlagen. Which means circular ditched enclosures. That's what they're called.
There you go. Fantastic.
I think we should learn that word and use it exclusively from now on.
The intriguing thing about Pomelta is there's actually a number of sites like it. Gosek Circle is the other one that springs to mind, where they were built with close set timber posts. I think Pomelta had 1,200 timber posts.
I don't know the number.
I mean,
Can't help you there.
It's a stunning piece of work. Now they've reconstructed it, and we question the reconstruction quite heavily, although they can tell from the excavations that there were 1,200 upright timber posts. The reconstruction shows, they've given them lintels like Stonehenge. In fact, it has been called the German Stonehenge in a number of instances, where there is not one scrap of evidence, nothing to show that they would have had lintels. It's not to say they didn't. It's completely made up. And they've also done things like they've put cattle skulls dotted around the place. I'm pretty sure that's at Pomelta.
No, Pomelta. They've carved skulls into some of the tops of the
that's the
posts.
One.
Yeah. The ones with the cattle skulls are somewhere else in Austria, and there's another one that's been reconstructed. I think it's in Austria anyway.
Yeah,
but it's remarkable. I mean, there are lots of places like Pomelta, we could say, but Pomelta is like lots of other places. That's the thing. It's the ubiquity of them on the continent, up the Danube, through in Germany and Austria, Poland, Czech Republic, that kind of area. And not only that, but they're early, Rupert.
Yes.
They predate our Hinges by quite some time, and they seem to last as well. So we're talking in general about these. We're talking in general about circular ditched enclosures on the continent, but and not particularly about Pomelta. We did a thing about Pomelta. I'll put the link in the description below, where we talked quite considerably about it, and that was because the amount of fantastic archaeology that had been going on there. Yeah,
that is true. That is true. But I'm curious though. Did I mishear you though? I mean, the Pomelta itself is 4,200 years old. Is the given date.
Well, that's the fascinating thing. That would make it very strange in the timescale, because the other Hinges, Gosek, is much earlier. So and yet it's almost identical. So,
what's the date you've got for Gosek?
I don't have it right now, but it was, it's Neolithic at least.
Because if you look at Coupland enclosure, then that's 6,000.
Pomelta. Thank you, Francis. Is that right, Francis? Pomelta, not Pomelta. A correction on the placement of the accent on that.
So Gosek is 5,000 BC.
Exactly. But that is that is the dating for most of these kinds of structures on the continent. And you begin to wonder, who influenced whom then.
Well, but also I think, bearing in mind that until you got to, you can't even say the Bronze Age. I mean, until we got to a period culturally of mass production, then what have you got at your disposal for making enclosures? You got timber. Why you wouldn't use anything else, because it's the most sensible thing to use for the job. Now we still use, whether it's sports arenas or or whatever, or a farm, if we didn't have barbed wire or whatever, then we would still be using timber today. So the fact that they were using it to make the walls of their enclosures for 3,000, 4,000, 5,000 years, I don't think that's a surprise at all, personally, if you see what I mean.
Diorman, the investigation of Pomelta, and just looking around just to refresh memory on that, is quite blown my mind. In fact, I'm inspired. I think Rupert and I should do a European road trip in which we visit every of the one of the 150 henge monuments or henge-like monuments in Europe, and then report back to you. We'll make a film and report back to you.
Yes.
I think that would be a very worthwhile adventure. We would solve the chronology of, henge monument building in the whole of Europe and see that actually we were behind the curve on that over here in this little island.
But it has to be said, we were behind the curve for pretty much everything, though, weren't we? I mean, when it came to any transition, that whether we were 500 years behind the times for the use of bronze or the use of iron.
Yeah, and then we tried to make up for it by really showing off, by making one of those darn things out of stone.
Indeed.
Yeah. I think we exhausted the possibilities there. But aside from it being a henge, Pomelta, beg your pardon, with the extraordinary arrangement of posts inside, there is a massive settlement there, or in prehistoric community terms, it's a big settlement associated with that, upon which a huge amount of archaeology has been done. So, as far as dates are concerned, I suppose we have to look to that and can't argue with them, because settlements like that are bound to produce dates. But how the circle is, the henge is being dated. But it's interesting because it's one of the first places I've seen where you see the community actually adjacent to the henge. I bet Josh Pollard would kill to have that kind of evidence of community alongside Avebury, for example. We've sat in a lecture hall listening to Josh Pollard bemoan the fact that all he could find was tens of thousands of pieces of flint, no evidence of habitation or anything like that adjacent to Avebury at all. But there at Pomelta, you got what I think he would have liked to have found.
Not to mention a number of dead people in the ditch.
Yes. Thereby hang several tales, we think, of course.
Yes. Because it does look, these people, do you know what? This is shocking. I should have looked it up. I apologize. But it wasn't a lie, was it? It was about 13 people, something like that?
Yes.
In the ditch, was it? And it looks like they were all executed. They've died with a pretty massive whack to the back of the head.
Yeah.
And then just unceremoniously dumped in the ditch is what it seems. But
I'm sorry, I can't fill in the details for you there either.
Well, yeah, but it's one of the things. He's back again.
Your cat is determined.
No, he's just. The trouble with these kinds of excavations is that it is almost impossible to say, without completely stripping the place down and trying to create a chronology. It's impossible to say, at what point these people were executed and dumped in the ditch. That it could have been ages after the settlement was disused. You don't know.
Yeah.
It doesn't seem likely to me that they would have been unceremoniously dumped in the ditch and just left it there if the place was still in use.
So, Diorman, I'm really so glad you asked that question, and I apologise that we haven't really been clear about Pomelta itself. But it's sort of exploded this whole thing about the ubiquity of circular ditched enclosures on the continent, and how many of them there are, and what story there is to tell about the relationship of continental rondelles and henges. We shall investigate further, and we are. This really feeds into our narrative, that we're investigating. So, thanks for stirring the pot there. With that, I think we'll move on.
Do you know what? I just want to say one other thing.
Yep.
He's gone again. That there's one thing that I think we are so bad about, and that's we are so obsessed with categorizing things that not only do we give things different names, but we will give them different names if there is the slightest difference. So if something has a ditch but it doesn't have a bank, we'll call it something else. And so you look at the different available names that you get throughout Europe, whether it's raths, rondels, roundels. What was the German name again, Mike?
Oh, sorry.
Really must learn it.
Yeah.
But you see my point that you might have something that it is purely and simply that the people had. I promise I will learn it. But it could be that you have made it different because of your available workforce. So you didn't dig a particularly deep ditch because it was just too much for the workforce available. It could be that the soil didn't support it. I mean, that we've got various instances in Britain looking at henges where the ditches of henges are particularly shallow because they get down to bedrock where they had just been cutting down through soil, but the bedrock was quite close to the surface. So they made the ditches wider rather than deeper. And there's others where it's on gravel, and if they'd dug any deeper, then the walls would have collapsed, that sort of thing. So, it could be that the way we categorize things is completely off the mark, and actually we should be looking at what the function is. Does the ditch serve the same function throughout? And therefore, the shape of it is kind of irrelevant. As Kenny Brophy said, we should think about henge being a verb, not a noun. To henge something, to give it a ditch and a bank. Whether it's rectangular like King Arthur's Hall or circular. I'll shut up now.
Okay, Jimmy, are you there, Jimmy Lawley? Because you've got a question coming up. Do you think the apparent correlation between the Thornborough Orion's belt and the pyramids of Giza is A, BS, B, coincidence, C, evidence of deeper connection between ancient civilizations, or D, none of the above? Jimmy's referencing the apparent shape on the ground. Thornborough henges are in fact 3 henges, huge henges, which laid out on the ground almost in a line, but not quite so, because they mirror the way that Orion's belt appears in the sky. And quite a lot of ink has been spilt, making a correlation between the arrangement of Thornborough henges on the ground in the same way that a lot of ink has been spilt, debating whether the pyramids of Giza are arranged to mirror the arrangement of Orion's belt in the sky. So what do we think, Rupert?
I don't think it's BS at all. I think it's very deliberate. In fact, there's a very good book by... Do you know what? I had it. I lent it to somebody, and I never saw it again. It's called Before the Pyramids, I think. Did you get a copy of it, Mike?
No. Oh, yes, I did, actually. I don't think I've read it, though.
It's well worth reading.
I'll do that.
It's called Before the Pyramids, and it's by... oh, God, I'm going to look it up. Butler.
I thought it... No, I can't see it. I can't help you. Sorry.
It is by... Yes, it is. Alan Butler and Christopher Knight. I reckon if you're interested in this, I recommend reading it. I'm afraid it goes off on one at the end because they start talking about... the construction of, I think, is it Washington? That's all Masonic and what have you.
Okay, but is Thornborough Hinges
they're analysing Thornborough as actually the precursor to Giza, and you can take that or leave it, but their argument is compelling. They've done, the research is solid. That doesn't mean it's right. It's an interpretation. But the point is that you can't dispute the fact that the angles of the hinges match Orion's belt absolutely exactly. And that's something that I don't think that would have been accidental, because it serves absolutely no purpose whatsoever. So, it only makes sense that they would be doing it to echo some celestial thing.
I have Jan Harding's. Jan Harding is the lead archaeologist, because not much work has been done on the Hinges, and the work that has been done has been led by Jan Harding, and that's the full report, archaeological report on the Thornborough Hinges. Not a vast amount is made of that. It is, bypassed a little, but it is mentioned, and they've gone to the trouble of looking at the alignments and what Orion was actually doing at that time. What time are we talking about?
What, Thornborough?
Yeah.
It's 5,000 years old, isn't it?
Yeah. Probably a bit later than that. But anyway, and the fact that at that time, Orion would have started appearing in the sky mid-August and would remain in the sky through the winter months until March. So it would only be seen, in the winter months, which is an interesting thing. So that renders, if Thornborough has a sort of gathering place importance, then it would have been a winter gathering place. Mind you, of course, Stonehenge, of course, is significantly figured on the midwinter sunrise, so that's not too surprising a thing. But the fact that it does, and there are alignments from within the henge itself, and I think there's a couple of post holes that are not otherwise explained, other than by having an alignment on the upstaged, all upstaged by animals. Careful. Oh, mine isn't here. Probably a good job. I don't know. I don't think it's coincidental either. I don't think there's evidence of a deeper connection between ancient civilizations, because it's so difficult to take the time thing into account. Because it is more likely that simply Orion's belt is a significant thing in the sky, and it's apparent to everybody wherever you are in the world. So, it's not surprising that something like that would have a significance. Whether it's generated from the same set of beliefs, that's another matter entirely. Whether those beliefs coincide, we'll never know. But I like the Thornborough Henge thing. Having been there, and the important thing is about places like that is people needed to know when they were going to be there. And having, it's almost, I said this to Rupert after coming back, I like the Orion thing, it's like a kind of branding thing, a branding campaign. People know what to associate with it. It's there in the ground. We've mirrored Orion. There it is in the sky. You know where this place is, you know what it's about, and you know the time of year that you should come here. It's all wrapped up in a nice package. People will remember that and honour that. Whether there's a deeper significance, of course, I don't know. But then you got to remember that the sky meant far, 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 far more back then, because you could actually see the thing.
Yeah. Yeah, it was worth pointing out. I'm looking at a couple of comments. It's worth pointing out that other than precession, where the actual position of the North Star has changed slightly, but apart from that, there is no difference to the sky now from 5,000 years ago. None at all. But yeah, it's just, as you say, I mean, every civilization has its own relationship with the stars. And you can, in fact, it's a really intriguing thing. If you do some research on the different cultural names for Orion, and no, I don't remember them off the top of my head. It is something I looked into a while ago. That it is amazing how many of them actually relate to hunting in some way. Yeah. And so that for me, it does make me think, well, how far back can you take astronomy as a whole? That when did man first start looking at patterns in the sky? And
giving them meaning.
Why did they start giving them particular characteristics? I find it really intriguing that there are at least 8 to 10 cultures that called Orion something to do with hunting. Why? What on earth does that come from? Don't know.
And that is the big question that gets asked. And until we can do some extraordinary deep dive investigation on that, I don't know, if there is, if anybody's has enough deep information, deep actual knowledge on that can give us any kind of clue as to a single origin story for the shapes in the sky. It raises, it's great, and it raises a lot of avenues to go down.
Yeah,
but
I think
that
pick up on something that. I'm just going to pick up on something that Kevin has said. He said that Polaris, you mean the pole star. I mean, we call it Polaris, but you're talking about the star that was actually positioned at the celestial pole. So yes, the position of the Earth in relation to the whole sky has changed by that small amount, but the patterns of the stars in the sky have not changed. And that's an important, it's a distinction to be made there. That the Orion looks the same today as it did then.
Yeah. Was Orion particularly clear in the sky during the main hunting season? Nice one, Sibylla.
I suppose it depends what you call the main hunting season. I mean,
Shay, where are you?
Yeah, we could do a Shay for that, really. I don't know what you'd call the main hunting season, really.
I don't know. We're not hunters. Please inform us. Anybody that does hunt and has a insight onto seasonal, the seasonal aspects of hunting, depending on where on the earth you are, of course. But yes, sunscreen Orion is a winter constellation, so no crops being grown. Good point. Good point. I think that's got a lot to do with it. Can we any more to say, Rupert?
No, I mean there's a lot of comments that if you're the thing is that you're getting into picky semantics really, where I don't agree with that. In 5,000 years I don't agree with that.
What's that?
The positions. Some people are saying that the positions of the stars have changed. In fact, they have changed in vast lengths of time. They haven't changed in a few thousand years.
5,000 years.
Other than precession has changed the angle of the Earth in relation to the sky.
It's shifted the place on the horizon where certain stars rise and set by a degree or two, but the stars' relationship to themselves and the shapes have not changed. Cork says, traditionally my people took more importance in the spaces between the stars rather than the stars themselves, like the great emu that fills the dark spaces in the Milky Way. Love it. Thank you for your input there, Cork. Yeah, with that. Lovely. Yeah. Okay, stalling there, so I'm going to move on to Richard Johnson's question. Oh, except it's not.
That's That's Jennifer.
No, I don't know if I've completely messed that. Hold on. Oh no, it is Jennifer, and I misspoke. Is the analysis of dental enamel or the petrous portion the best way to examine migratory patterns? Would DNA analysis be more appropriate, or is this a both and scenario? It's kind of not either of those, because it's chalk and cheese, apples and oranges, isn't it?
They do different things.
Yeah.
I mean, DNA will tell you about the movements of people en masse. And analysis of teeth that's an isotopic thing. They can read strontium from teeth, so they can tell you where that individual spent parts of their lives. So if it's in adult teeth, for example, then they can tell you that a person had to have lived in this particular area after they have gained their adult teeth. Oh Lord! I mean, it's such a massively brilliant field. In fact, you know what? We're talking to Harry Robson soon, and it's an aspect of Harry's work as well. He analyzes enzymes and all sorts of stuff.
Lectica is Theo. Sorry. Of course, beg pardon. Well
we
done,
got names mixed up.
Yes, we got names mixed up. Yeah, it's Theo. Sorry, Theo, if you're watching this later or now. We get confused with Twitter handles and YouTube handles and
remembering names, let alone remembering the real name behind a pseudonym. It just I can only apologise for my own personal senior moments. But
is that your sound gone or my sound?
Fundamental difference. Pardon?
My sound went.
What did you say?
My sound went. Yeah.
Not to me.
Okay, cool. That's good then.
Yeah. That's the fundamental thing, is that analysis of teeth will tell you where an individual spent parts of their lives. DNA will be telling you about the progression of those people from which is how we can tell, for example, that the transitions at the beginning of the Neolithic and at the end of the Neolithic, we can tell that these were people from Eastern Europe and the steppes and what have you, who came across from continental Europe into Britain. That can be told from the DNA, if that answers the question in a nutshell.
But they don't both do the same job.
No, they do different things.
Yeah. So, migratory patterns, DNA is the tool for the job there. Okay, now Lectica forgot me again. Slapped wrists.
I'm sorry.
Bears of little brain.
I know.
How can we make it up, Theo? And get a bonus question, maybe. Make a question up in the next 5 minutes.
Yeah. Why can't you think better?
Hopeless. My fault, actually. It was me that gave the bum steer there. Kev, hi Kev. Are you still with us? Kev Riley asks, is there a correlation between the demise of the Neolithic people and arrival of the Indo-Europeans and the end of the Henge/Circle/Cursus building and the kissed cairn beaker burials? Answer, yes. Next question.
Yeah.
Sorry.
That is it in a nutshell. Yeah, absolutely. It's basically you had the people coming in who clearly brought they were the people who brought bronze in, and as soon as we started messing around with metal, then stone just ceased to have its cultural, social, whatever importance. Complete dynamic change. That's simplistic, but
I think it's not quite right to lump cursuses in with henges and circles, because cursus monuments tended to be way back towards the beginning of the Neolithic and weren't so much in use, I think. So many henges were sort of layered on top of cursus monuments, so the use and cursus monuments had not gone extinct, but I think their ubiquity of construction sort of passed by. The other interesting thing, it's not so much that you get the new build. The real comparison, you've used burials as the counterpart to henges and circles and cursus building, but they're really the counterpart to the long barrow. It's what happens is, long barrows, mind you, long barrows stretch way back to the beginning of the, to the Neolithic, but they're certainly gone. It's the rise of the circular barrows, and not only that, but with the long barrow or previous Neolithic burial practices, you've got communal burial going on with very little by the way of grave good or grave goods going on. So you've got this practice of putting everybody... What are you giggling about now?
I'm just giggling at Kevin's comment. He says, yeah, that's why 30 seconds after he posted that, he edited out curses.
Oh, I think I copied and pasted it about 30 seconds.
So you were
nice
quick
one, Kevin. Yeah, cool. Cairns and kists associated with the beaker burials, absolutely, which tend to be in contrast to multiple burials and communal burials of the Neolithic, single burials with grave goods. So it's not just what we see in the landscape, but it's the indicator of the complete cultural change, complete worldview change, because you can take that as a very reliable indicator of something very different going on if you move from communal burials and worshipping of the ancestors and taking their bones out and putting them back together again and circulating, and then and single burials that you leave alone. Totally different mindset, must be. So the demise of the Neolithic, it was a process, but it was a very short process in kind of, genetic terms. If you think about, it took about 200 years for the new genes to completely replace. Not completely replaced, but by 200 years, round about from 2500 BC, 90% of the gene pool had been replaced by the new folk, by the Beaker folk. That's what we're told. Are we answering your question, Kevin? I mean, beyond the yes bit. But you're absolutely right. I think it's one of the huge surprises in the whole of our prehistory in the UK, coming back to this, even after having made Standing with Stones all those years ago, that there was this extraordinary changeover, both at the end of the Mesolithic and the beginning of the Neolithic, and from the Neolithic going into the Bronze Age and the Chalcolithic. Two big, huge turnovers there in population and culture.
And it is a mystery. I mean, Chubby Moth has just said, that sounds like a violent episode. And that's one of the curious things, because there's no evidence to show that it was violent. People have wondered whether, maybe it was plague, that people came in and brought diseases that the incumbent people couldn't go with. No evidence to support that either.
It doesn't need to be anything cataclysmic at all for change to take, even that rapidly. All you need is one culture to be more successful than another at exploiting resources, and that's it. Done deal.
That's true. But it is still strange that the incumbent DNA pretty much disappeared.
Yeah.
To such a vast extent, which meant that if the people who were still here weren't killed, they were no longer breeding. And if they're no longer breeding, why is that? And there's you can extrapolate all sorts of possible reasons for that. But whichever way you look at it, it is still a curious period in history that it was a pretty much complete genetic takeover. It's very strange.
Yeah.
But there's no evidence to show that it was disease.
I don't think personally it needs it. I think, like I said, it just needs people to be more successful. And the other interesting thing around about 2005, even though this magnificent thing of Stonehenge had just gone up, the people were already, the population was already in decline. Production, agricultural production was in decline. So there's a kind of fin de siècle thing in my mind that I've got stuck going on round about. That Stonehenge is almost a kind of a last sling of something that was generally in decline. The way of life, the dependence on livestock that they'd chosen, and it had shifted towards the end, late Neolithic. Things were shifting back from being agrarian back to being more pastoralists. They were depending more and more on pork and beef and stuff. And maybe it was just that began to fail. That they were exhausting their resource. They're exhausting their way of life. So when people came over to visit Stonehenge, they thought, "Oi, we can do something here, lads." It doesn't need violence. It doesn't need disease or anything like that.
It doesn't. Do you know what? Dude D has just made a good point. He says the incumbent DNA did not disappear. They didn't appear in the subsequent major burials, which may have been about status. And that's a very good point. When we were talking, in fact, if you haven't heard it, if you look out, we did an interview with Tom Booth, who is Tom is all about DNA and migrations throughout prehistory, and we asked Tom exactly that question. So all our knowledge, what we call our knowledge, so what we think we know right now, is based on what? And there are certain aspects that's based on 200 remains, 200 sets of human remains. And you think, well, we're basing our knowledge about an entire civilization on the 200 people who've been dug up. So the point that you make, is absolutely spot on. That the reason that archaeologists feel confident to say that that's what happened is because these burials or these remains have been found in so many disparate places. It's not like they were all found in the same kinds of burial or what have you. So it seems to have happened sort of across the whole of society, but it is still based on such a tiny sample. It's a good point.
Really good point. Thanks for that. Excellent. Well, who was it said? Lazzy Matt says, "Blimey, this is a bumper episode," and he's not wrong. We're coming up to the 2-hour mark.
We are coming up to the 2-hour mark,
and that was actually the last question. So I'll actually ask you the question: is this too long? I mean, we have sort of kept talking. We have gone into the long grass a bit.
Are you asking me?
No, I'm asking folks out there. Is 2 hours too long?
But they can all turn it off.
Sure, but I'm still asking the question whether being more concise is more, is better from their point of view as our audience, whom we aim to please. Yeah. Never too long, says Rich. Okay. Thank you. 2 hours is perfect length. Right. See, I'm so glad I asked. And before we go, I have to say,
David, it's like sitting in the pub talking. I wish it was.
Theo, did you manage to think of a supplementary question? We can, as our. Is your compensation for our dreadful memory loss? No? Okay. All very interesting. Thank you, Merrin. We will speak to Merrin again and get Merrin on to talk about beer again at some point. I'm sure folk will be fascinated to that because we've got a bigger audience now, and people are always interested in beer and brewing, so that would be a good idea. Longer is better. Well, we're happy. We're happy to talk if you're happy to listen, and we're happy to learn new stuff and churn it over and. Try and make the connections. I think that's the nice thing, isn't it? All right. With that, Rupert, unless you've got anything more to add, I'm going to call it a day, call it a night, actually.
I don't have anything else to add apart from thank you so much for being such an active bunch tonight.
Really.
It's great to have your input.
Truly is, and your support.
We mentioned on the last Patreon show about whether we should have specific subjects. That's something we can chew on, I think, isn't it? Really.
Anyway, and don't be afraid if you've got ideas about how we could improve this, or if it works just fine the way it is in this format. I mean, it works for us, but we're always open to new ideas about what would work for the monthly show, the monthly live. Then let us know. Okay. I'm going to press the button, which will get us out of here, Rupert. All right.
Take good care,
Cheers, folks. Bye-bye.
We'll see you next time.